Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dome 9 webinar, Active Cloud Protection, Your Safety Net in the Public Cloud. My name is Thelen Blum, and I will be your host for today's webinar. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Dome 9, and I'm here with Alex Gestorfen, Cloud Solutions Architect for Dome 9 Security. A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our website afterwards. All attendees are in listen-only mode. We will close with Q&A at the end of the session. If you'd like to ask a question, please type it in the questions window of GoToWebinar, and Alex will address as many questions as possible, time permitting. We have also uploaded 3 reference handouts, which includes our Dome 9 ARC platform and IAM safety product briefs, and our Dome 9 active protection feature brief. Please feel free to download this content at any time during the webinar. I want to present a little background on Alex before we get started. Alex is a Cloud Solutions Architect for Dome 9 Security. Prior to joining, Alex spent time as a Systems Administrator at Juniper Networks and in sales with Ops Clarity and Sumo Logic. In his work at Dome 9, Alex has the opportunity to blend his technical and sales background while working with customers and prospects and championing a successful and secure transition to the public cloud with Dome 9's adoption. Alex holds a BA from San Jose State University and is a certified CCSP and AWS Solutions Architect professional. Now we will launch into our webinar discussion today. As businesses continue to move production workloads and valuable data to the public cloud, the consequences of security breaches can be catastrophic. All it takes is a single vulnerability or lapse in process to expose highly sensitive private assets to the world. This one-strike rule, combined with the dynamic nature of the cloud, creates the need for active protection of cloud environments. Dome 9 ARC offers powerful capabilities that provide always-on security enforcement for your multi-cloud environment. In the 60-minute webinar, you will learn how these tools go beyond monitoring and security assessment and serve as guardrails for your cloud workloads, ensuring that you stay secure without losing agility. Without further ado, I will now pass the ball to Alex. Let's get started.
Perfect. Thanks, Don. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for taking the time today to learn a little bit more about Dome 9. The way this is going to go is I'm going to give you guys just a quick crash course in Dome 9 for the ones of you that aren't too familiar with what we do. And then we're going to spend obviously the majority of this hour talking about the active controls that we can leverage within Dome 9 for your public cloud. So let's get into it. So first off, just a quick background about Dome 9. We were founded back in 2011, and we're headquartered out in Mountain View, California, with engineering in Tel Aviv. We've got over 250 customers now, and the majority of them are actually enterprise as well. And what we're really doing is we're focusing on giving you better security and visibility into what is going on within your public cloud workloads. And we work across AWS, Azure, and Google. And so the overarching Dome 9 product, we call it the Dome 9 ARC, which we'll talk about in the next slide as well. And that stands for Assess, Remediate, and Control. But within that, the product is sold and broken into 3 distinct modules. And we're actually going to be talking a little bit about all 3 of them today. So the first module we'll be touching on is network security. A lot of times when we're talking about network security, we'll be looking at Clarity, which is Dome 9's tool for visualizing security group and network configurations. But again, that's outside of the scope of our webinar today. So instead, we're going to be looking at dynamic access in that context. Second module is the compliance engine and compliance and governance. And here's where we can go and use this to assert on rules and configurations that I want to see across these different clouds. And then from there, the next piece is that we'll be talking about how we can build on that compliance engine to more automatically remediate problems that we find in these different clouds. And then the last module we'll be talking about today is our IAM safety module. And what that is a way for us to add an extra layer of control and protection on top of whatever it is that you guys are doing today in the context of IAM. And so with that, we just talked about the 3 modules, but as I said, the overarching platform, we call it the Dome 9 ARC, which again stands for Assess, Remediate, and Control. And I'd say a lot of what we talk about in the context of Dome 9 on a day-to-day basis is really a lot more on the assess side of things. I'd say the biggest and kind of most initial challenge that people are facing is just being able to get visibility across what is going on in these different accounts and clouds. And so that's really the, I'd say where Dome 9 started out, but it's definitely not all that we have. And so today we're going to be talking more about the other two pieces here, which is remediate and control, which is once you guys have gotten that visibility, you know what's going on within these different environments, and you know what you want to be seeing. How do we then take that and lock things down so that we don't have to get in and do a ton of management on an ongoing basis? And we can instead really start to enforce kind of golden configurations and let Dome 9 do the heavy lifting as far as actually making sure things stay the way we want them to. All right. So the first thing that we're going to talk about as far as actually actively controlling these different clouds is this thing we have called tamper protection. And so with that too, when I onboard a new account into Dome 9, I'm presented with the option about how much permissions I want to give us. If you go just read only, obviously that's where a lot of those assess capabilities are going to come in. But if you give us read write capabilities, on that initial onboarding, all those write capabilities you give us are focused around security group management in one way or another. And so there's going to be 3 different pieces of that we're going to be talking about, and this is the first. And so what tamper protection is kind of a guardrail that we can set up around my security groups to really enforce a golden configuration. As we have more people managing these different workloads, we have lots of people potentially being able to make changes to security groups and network configurations. And as one of the challenges we've really seen in public cloud adoption is that our perimeter is kind of everywhere. And so if we have some new exposure that maybe we weren't aware of and is in this very sensitive spot, that could be a pretty significant problem. So here's a quick screenshot, but with that, the way that I want to do this today is we're going to go through the slides to kind of give us that high level about what's going on. But I'm going to be ping-ponging back and forth between the presentation and actually Dome 9 so that we can actually see how this looks in reality. So let's hop on over. All right. So if I want to make any changes to tamper protection, the first thing I want to do is I can go and I can turn it on my different security groups. So in this case, I drilled into my App1 server security group, which is sitting in my prod account. And so now let's say from here, we're looking at the security group and it's configured perfectly. I've gone through and I have made sure that all these ports are the only ports that I need open. And the sources that I'm taking in traffic from are only the places that I want. And so from here, if I have any change to the security group, if any of these ports are removed or anything is added, it's a problem, whether that would either be more exposure than I would need or want, or something is removed and therefore a service is going to break. And so if I want to set up these guardrails, what I can do is I can turn on tamper protection as is already turned on here. And when tamper protection is turned on, what happens is that we take a baseline of the current state of that security group when it's enabled. And from there, on an ongoing basis, we're going to be continuously monitoring this security group and comparing that baseline that we took to the current state. And if there's any deviation from that baseline that we detect, what's going to happen is we're going to automatically roll it back. We're going to log that, and then we're going to alert you on that as well. And so again, assuming that we've got some of these security groups that are very important, and especially ones that say that are for our more sensitive services, this is a great way to lock things down so that instead of trying to just assert on individual configurations and saying things like, I don't want SSH exposed in the security group, we can just say, whatever is going on here, let's lock that down and really make sure things stay as good as they are today. All right. So from here, there's kind of a secondary piece of tamper protection, and it's the second part of what you're getting when you give Dome 9 read-write access within the context of security groups, and it's a thing we have called region lock. And what region lock is I consider it kind of like a super tamper protection, because they're similar in what they and how they work, but the actual impact of what they're doing is a little bit different. And so what region lock is a way to enforce non-use of regions. I think AWS is somewhere between 14 and 16 different regions that they provide today. And from there, the max that I see our customers actually using in any one account is 3, maybe very, very max 4. And so for that, for every one of their accounts, then you end up with 10 plus regions that should never be used. And if they are in use, it's a problem. And there's a couple different reasons as are spelled out here that could be an issue. The first is data sovereignty. You know, if I have a bunch of data that can't leave, or they can't leave Europe or can't leave the U.S. or anything like that, and I really want to make sure that that everything is only running in places that it's supposed to, that could be a great use for region lock as part of their your kind of overarching data sovereignty strategy. The second is shadow IT. We like to think that that it shouldn't happen, but at the same time, there's an unfortunately high amount of times that that will go into a customer environment and find Alex test 123 spin up in some random region that hasn't been touched in a very long time. At the end of the day, if people have the ability to run tests wherever they please, even if they're not supposed to, a lot of times they still will, unfortunately. And then the last is compromised access keys. It's an unfortunately classic use case, but something we really see a lot of, which is someone goes and your access keys get posted up on GitHub, and the next thing you know, you have a 6-figure bill from Amazon because someone has been mining Bitcoin in a region that you never look at. And this happens all the time, and we really want to help prevent this and let you know about it as soon as it happens, so that you don't find out just because you get this big nasty bill. So here's the slide, but again, let's pop back into the UI to see how this looks. So what I'll do here, if I want to go and I'll turn on region lock, is it's on a per account basis. And I can click in this case, we're still on that prod account we were talking about before. And in this environment, it looks like the majority of our workloads are running in Ireland, North Virginia, and Oregon, which means that maybe I don't want anything running in Ohio. That's not a good place for me. That's not part of our desired architecture. And so from here, again, we want to lock things down and make sure that that things aren't happening there. So what I can do is I can go to Edit, and then from here I can turn on region lock. And so the way this goes, there's kind of a multi-step strategy that that I recommend taking when we're trying to turn region lock on these different regions. The first thing we'll do is for our default security group that we can't delete within this region, is we should go and we should have default security group zeroed out as my best practice, and then I should turn this on tamper protection, because what that means is now, even though I can't remove this default security group, I've made sure that things stay as locked down as they should, and so now I don't have to worry about this anymore. As kind of that third step then of what we'll do within this region is we're going to turn on region lock. And what region lock does is when it's turned on, it's continuously looking at this region. But in this case, if we see any new security groups pop up, they're automatically detected, and then all of the ingress and egress rules are zeroed out. And so what that means is now, for any of these workloads that are created and are running in this place that we've decided things shouldn't, we've effectively quarantined them. And the reason that we do this at the security group level instead of at the instance level is because there's always a balance that we're trying to maintain as far as how much capabilities and permission, or how much capabilities can we give you as a company, but do it with the least amount of permissions. As you can imagine, if you gave us star permissions into your account, we could do whatever you want and kill off all these instances and all of those sorts of use cases. But that's pretty dramatic, and that's not something that you probably want to give us permissions to do, and those aren't permissions that we want anyways. And so within that, by having region lock just zero out these security groups, we've effectively quarantined these that workload that has been spun up that was unapproved. And then because you get alerted on this as well, now you can get in and actually take that next step as far as remediating and figuring out what was going on, and probably killing off these instances if that is the best course of action. All right. Okay. So tamper protection and region lock, again, are really the two core things as far as locking down security groups and kind of setting up some sorts of guardrails, obviously around security groups or regions where security groups shouldn't be popping up. But the next thing we have here is this thing we have called dynamic access leases. And it's similar to those other two things we were just talking about, in that, again, we're dealing with security group management in this context. But it's less around kind of active protection and more around active controls, if you will. And again, all three of these modules we were talking about all fall into that. All three of these features that we're talking about all fall into that network security module that we saw before. And so, what dynamic access is a way to lock down our security groups and then only give access when we need it and for as long as it should be open. So what that means is, let's say that we have a bastion host that needs to be sitting at the front of our environment and letting people in when when they need to say SSH into some of these boxes. That's very much okay, and in a frequent use case that we hear. But at the same time, you really don't want to have these boxes be any more exposed than they need to be. Ideally, they're going to be nice and hardened and locked down, but if we can prevent people from even being able to knock on the door in the first place, then that's probably going to be better and more secure. And so that's really where dynamic access comes in. And so the way that this works is, let's see here. All right. So if I wanted to go and lock things down further, what I can do is I set them up on dynamic access. And what dynamic access does is, when it goes and gets locked down, we have that port shut down by default. But then if someone needs to go in and get access, what they can do is they can go and acquire a lease. So let's say in this case that I'm not Ohio, we decided we don't want to be running anything there. Let's take a look at Oregon. In Oregon here, let's say that I've got my bastion host sitting and running in the staging 2 security group. Well, right now we've gone and we've decided that SSH is locked down, and on a day-to-day basis, no one can get to this because it's not actually open to any services. And again, so that's great, but if I'm here and I do need access to this, there's a reason that we had this port open before dynamic access. How do I get in? What I can do is I can click on this button and acquire a lease. And so what this does, when I clicked in on that, is now this lease opens up a pinhole port on the security group. We've opened up just SSH. It's been opened up just to my/32. And then again, this has also only been opened up for an hour. And so what this means is that now I can get in and I can do whatever work I need to do through this host. But at the same time, if I do nothing after an hour, this lease is going to expire. And that rule then is going to be removed, and everything is going to be just as locked down and secure as it was before. And again, I think the use case for this that comes to mind the most are locking down bastion hosts, but that's far from the only thing that that this can be used for. We have one customer who is using this where the security team manages dynamic access, and then from here, when developers need access to certain ports and scopes, the security team can go and give them access to the things that they requested, but from there, they don't need to worry about going in and cleaning this up after the developers are done, because it's going to be taken care of automatically. Because as a general theme, when people need access for things, they're much better about asking for access in the first place than they are about following up afterwards and actually cleaning up these rules that don't need to be in use anymore. And so it's going to be a great way to help keep these security groups tidy and not have a bunch of fluffy and unused rules sitting in these security groups. And again, one more use case that we have from this that is something that I wouldn't have even thought of, but it's a pretty great thing, and actually one of the biggest users of dynamic access is Car Driver Magazine. And so what they do is they actually have a secure portal for authoring articles that is locked down behind dynamic access. And so from there, when their editors are out of the track and they need to go and write new content about the about the latest cars they're driving and whatnot, they can go, they acquire dynamic access, and then from there they can go and get exposed to that portal, and they can get in and probably log in and then write whatever articles they need to. And so, the nice thing is that at the end of the day, the use cases for this can be extremely varied because, we're really just talking about ports and scopes. And so what ports you use and what it's locked down to can be totally varied based on what makes sense for you. But yeah, so there's a couple different ways, by the way, to get access to these different leases. From here, I clicked on Get Access Here, which is how I got access to that staging security group. But there's a couple different ways as well. First of all, if I want, I can go and I can send a lease to someone else. Let's say that I've got a person who's on site for the week and I need to give them access to a certain set of services. I can go and open those rules up right from here. If there's a service that you are using a lot and you don't want to log into Dome 9 every time in order to get a lease, you can actually go and use our little Chrome extension right here and set that up for what that default lease is that you want when you click that button. And then lastly, as a general theme of Dome 9, everything here is API driven, which means that this, as well as all those other things that we were just talking about previously, are all exposed via API, and it's all documented. So if there was a time when you wanted to get in and tie this in with some automation, so so that we can more programmatically open up these ports, but for a certain amount of time, that's absolutely an option as well. All right. So again, when we link up a new account to Dome 9 and you give us write permissions, those three capabilities are the three main things that you get when you give us write access. I'd say the fourth that we haven't touched on today is just the more basic ability to be able to make changes to security groups right from within Dome 9, as opposed to having to ping pong between Dome 9 and AWS when a problem is found. But from here, that's definitely not the end of what we can do as far as more of these active controls and remediations that we want to lock down. And that brings us to that third module we talked about at the beginning, which is called IAM Safety. And IAM Safety was created originally for a compromised credentials kind of event. The code spaces kind of use case is a specific one, if any of you are familiar with that article. Basically, what happened is that this company had some compromised credentials, and someone got those credentials and they logged into CodeSpace's admin account, and they were logged in there with malicious intent and a high amount of privileges, and they essentially held this company hostage. And because CodeSpaces didn't in a timely manner pay the ransom or whatever it was that this person wanted, they started just deleting things. And so they started deleting buckets and killing off snapshots and just generally wreaking havoc on their environment. And eventually the company actually went out of business because of this event. And while that's a very, very extreme example, it's absolutely not out of the question. And as we talked about before within region lock and the whole Bitcoin thing, compromised credentials happen all the time. And so no matter how it is that someone might have access to this account, we really want to make sure that IAM is as locked down as possible everywhere. And so with that, again, let's pop on back. And so the way this is going to work is I'm going to show, we're going to talk a little bit of theory here on the Dome 9 side, how I would roll this out, what I would do, and kind of all of those things. And then from here, we'll actually jump into the AWS side to see in reality how this works. So on the Dome 9 side, there's not a ton that we do. It's more on actually the initial setup. But once you get it set up, you're not going to spend a bunch of time in this page. But the first thing that we do when we want to roll out IAM Safety is we have to decide what is important to us. What are those things that if that person was logged into my account would be catastrophic if they could do? And usually that falls into two kind of buckets of services and actions. And the first is things that aren't changed a whole lot, but when they do, it's very important. Changes to KMS, IAM, Route 53, all those kinds of things would, again, are very impactful. And if you do them wrong, can break a lot of things. And then the second is things that when they are changed are irrevocable. So again, deleting snapshots, killing off buckets, all those kinds of things are prime candidates for being locked down with IAM safety. And so from here, once we go and make those decisions about what it is that we want to lock down, we put that into a big explicit deny policy. And as I'm sure you're aware, in AWS, explicit denies always override allows. And so what that means now is when I take this policy for whatever users or roles I go and I attach it to, I've restricted access to those sensitive services so that they can't get in and make any of those changes. And that's the good kind of first part, but then the second part, which we'll talk about in a second here, is how do I get those permissions back if I'm here for a valid reason? And so for that, let's hop on over to AWS here. So in this case, in this environment, I am an admin. And so that means really before Dome 9 and IAM safety, I had permissions to do everything here. But as we were rolling this out and we're trying to decide what we wanted to lock down, we decided that DNS is a very sensitive service for us. And so that deny policy, one of the things that it describes is a deny over all of Route 53. Now from here, this is great because I go and I try to make some changes to DNS here, but in this case, I don't have permissions to do anything. And the nice thing about this is now if someone compromises my credentials, if they hijack my browser, if some way they have the same kind of view, this is what they're going to get, and they won't be able to get in and make any changes to my very sensitive DNS settings. But again, from here, if in this case, I'm here for a valid reason and I need these permissions because I had them in the first place, so there's some reason that that I can make changes, how do I get them back? And the answer to that is that we've got an app for Android and iOS. In this case, it's just an Android emulator. And so what happened here was I clicked on this button, and when I clicked on that button, I acquired a lease. And the lease is similar to dynamic access as we were just talking about in the way that it's open for a certain amount of time. By default, dynamic access is open for an hour. By default, IAM safety is open for 15 minutes, but both of those times are customizable. But now from here, that's as far as the similarities between the two capabilities go, because within IAM safety, we're not making any changes to security groups here. And instead, on the back end, what happens is that deny that was writing on my user in this case, when I acquired that lease, it's been dropped off. And kind of understanding how that works on the back end is actually a pretty important thing, because what that means here is when I acquired this lease, if I never had permissions to make changes to Route 53 in the first place, I still don't. Just because I dropped off that deny doesn't mean that I actually have the allow. But for me here, because I have acquired this lease and I'm an admin, and so I used to have permissions to Route 53, when I acquired that lease, I do get my old permissions back. And so now I've got my lease, I can come back here, and because that deny is gone, when I refresh, I can get in and make whatever changes I need to within Dome 9. But then again, after, like we said, 14 minutes now, when this lease expires, that deny is going to be attached right back onto my user, and everything's going to be just as locked down as it was beforehand. And with this, again, as I mentioned, the original use case for this was that compromised credentials type of event, where someone is logged into my account and is trying to do bad things. And while we have a lot of customers using it for that aspect, there's a secondary use case here which I see almost as much, which is instead of protecting against outside threats, what about internally? Again, if I'm an admin in this account, I can do a lot of things. And on a Monday morning, if I'm tired and haven't had my coffee yet, what if instead of protecting against outside threats, what do I want to protect myself against? And so really, this can be used instead kind of like a sudo for AWS, where before I go and I make any of these same kind of changes we talked about, I've got that extra little gut check to say, hey, are you sure you know exactly what you're doing? Because we've decided this is very important. Another thing we see is that people use this instead of locking down those services for things like locking down STS. So if I'm assuming a role into an important or sensitive account, we've locked that down, and so now that might be where that gate is, so that I know I'm going somewhere important before I get there. Again, the nice thing about this, similar to dynamic access, is that there's a ton of flexibility here. Because in this case, we're talking about IAM policies. Obviously, with dynamic access, we're talking about security groups. But within IAM safety, there's so much flexibility that that IAM policies offer, and so we can be as broad or specific as we want. And really, between the two, we can really get in and do whatever it is that I need to do. All right. So from here, everything we've talked about today is what you get when when you go with Dome 9, as far as what is productized and what you get and the capabilities that are offered. And this is great, and I'd say the majority of our customers are covered by these different kinds of capabilities we've spent this time talking about here. But what about going beyond this? What about doing more than just what we've talked about today? What if you have a more custom use case that you want to go and roll out? Or what if you want to do some of those aggressive changes that I said Dome 9 doesn't want the permissions to do? If you want to go in and kill off instances that aren't created with the right tags, or you want to delete internet gateways from any VPCs that we have decided need to stay private, or you want to delete permissions or delete buckets if there is a S3 bucket that's created with more exposure than you would want. All these kinds of things are very valid use cases, and we want you to be able to accomplish those kinds of those things. But again, we want to do it in a way where we're balancing kind of what we provide you with the permissions that we need versus you manage. And so for that, what we have is a project called CloudSupervisor 2, which I believe later today or early tomorrow is actually going to be set to public up on our GitHub. And what this is a way to take what we offer within Dome 9 and actually build on top of it. We'll talk a little bit about Dome 9 and continuous compliance and all of that in just a second. But the general theme is we're going to set up some compliance assessments to run on an ongoing basis. But then from there, if we see something failing that we want to automatically remediate, we can set up those events to fire off a notification over to SNS. And so again, that rule might be, my instance needs an owner tag, or I should only be running approved AMIs. Whatever it is, we can go and customize it within Dome 9. From here, what'll happen is this SNS topic that we're firing off events to, from Dome 9, is going to sit and be the trigger for a remediation function that is going to be provided by Dome 9. And so from here, within this CloudSupervisor 2 Lambda function, this is going to sit and actually be the engine that takes care of those custom actions that you're trying to accomplish. And so from here, the SNS topic has an event from Dome 9 saying, hey, there's an instance here that was failing whatever check it was that we have decided was important. And we've called this function. The function says, okay, I've got the event of what failed, and I've got the information about what I said I want to do when this fails. And then from here, this goes and actually runs the remediation action against your account. From here, with whatever the logs are that are generated, hopefully it's that everything was resolved and it all works. We go and we fire this back off to, we fire that event off to another SNS topic, which from there can be exported wherever it is that you please. Email, Slack, Splunk, Sumo Logic, wherever it is. The nice thing about SNS is that it's very flexible, and so you've really got a lot of different capabilities that you can do with it. And so it's kind of the last wrap up here, and I know we had an hour, but I don't want to drag things out if I've said everything I wanted to say. Is I'm just going to give you guys a little sneak peek of this. Again, everything here is, and it's available for you, and it's documented with how you roll it out and all of that. Deployment is all taken care of via CloudFormation, and so it's not, it does not take a whole lot of time and actually to get this rolled out in any one of your environments. And then from here, here's kind of the sample list of those type of actions that we're offering out of the box just today. And this is really just the start of actions that we are going to be offering. And so from here, you're going to see a lot more capabilities as we talk more with our customers and really decide, what from here, what other things are people trying to lock down and really automatically control. So right here, so we can go and stop instances, tag them, terminate them. We can quarantine users and roles here by basically adding a big explicit deny and applying those to a user role and really locking them down completely. We can turn on a password policy. We can delete buckets, delete permissions, delete security groups, or delete rules. And so both of these two security group actions here, again, are kind of tangential to what we were talking about within tamper protection and region lock. But maybe sometimes if there's something specific that you want to use, then that could still be applicable. The overarching theme of what we're trying to accomplish here is really make things as easy as possible for you to take what is provided to you and productized within Dome 9 and really give you that extra coverage for the last piece of automatic remediation that you need with as little amount of effort as possible. All right. And so from here, those are really everything that I wanted to cover today. Again, productized remediations. We've got network security, which is going to offer dynamic access, region lock, and tamper protection. We've got IAM safety for locking things down further on the IAM side of things. And then we've got CloudSupervisor too, which is really a add-on that comes from the compliance engine, where we can now take everything that we're just talking about today and really customize it and add on even more than we have straight out of the box. From that, we have a 14-day trial if any of you are very interested in getting in and trying this out. The nice thing about being an agentless solution is that setup is very straightforward. In the case of AWS, we link up via cross-account role, and all of the information and capabilities are going to be auto-populated as soon as you link up that account. So very low barrier to entry, and we would absolutely love any of you to get in and try out some of these capabilities. And with that, Dylan, back to you.
Okay, well, Alex, it looks like we have a few questions here. The first one is, what are the next plans for active protection from here?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say there's a couple things. As we're starting to roll out some of the active protections on the CloudSupervisor side, next capabilities are going to be prioritized from the customers and use cases that are presented to us. So got a list of some things that we're looking to do, like more capabilities around turning on logging and encryption within S3, deleting internet gateways, things like that. But as far as other active controls that are sitting in the product, the majority of those are actually going to stay that way for now and for the foreseeable future. I think beyond this, what you'll see more is taking some of that CloudSupervisor type capabilities and more of a merging between just setting up on a GitHub and actually having something in a product. So later this year, I think you're going to see a lot more of a tighter integration with that to give you that flexibility that you might need.
Okay. Next question. Are the Dome 9 events logged and exportable?
Yes and yes. Let's pop back over. Audit trail. Yeah, so here we've got the information about the IAM safety window that I opened. Here we've got a sample event of a tamper protection action that was happened. From here, we can go and we can export this to CSV, and this is also exportable via SNS as well. And so right from here, we can go and pump these logs into whatever other kind of centralization tool you might have for logging.
Okay. Next question. How granular can you get when turning on tamper protection? Can you get down to the VPC level?
Yes, we can go even further. So instead of just getting down to the VPC, we can actually get down all the way to the individual security group. I showed it before where we took a look at that just from one security group, but let's say that I wanted to turn tamper protection on everything for my US East region in this case. I can go and I can switch everything back and forth, or I can pick and choose whatever combination of security groups I want to be locked down or not.
Okay, and we have a few more here. Will there be any more robust serverless capabilities?
Robust serverless capabilities. I'd ask for some elaboration there, because serverless capabilities can be a pretty broad topic. The remediations we were talking about on the Cloud Supervisor side is all taken care of by Lambda. But as far as locking down functions otherwise, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what use cases they have in mind, so we could kind of get into it a little bit better.
Okay, well, that's as detailed as the question was. So
right. With that, please ping me with a follow-up, alex@dome9.com. Be happy to get more into it with whoever that was.
Okay. And another question we have here, does any of the functionality look different for the different cloud providers?
Yeah, it does. And so with that, we've, I guess a good place to start would be kind of with a little background about Dome 9. We talked already about how we were founded back in 2011. And with that, we started off with AWS. They've been around the longest, and really are have been kind of the leader in this space. And so within that, the capabilities are definitely the most deep within AWS. But especially over the last, I'd say, 6 months, we've really seen a lot of adoption coming through on the Azure side. In my opinion, Google is still trailing as a pretty distant third, but we are still seeing a little bit more of that pickup. So within that today, the majority of the things that we talked about today are AWS capabilities. Tamper protection and region lock for Azure, I believe, are about 2 weeks out. So they're there, but it's going to be here very shortly. And within Azure today, we can already make changes to those NSGs right from within Dome 9. IAM safety, unfortunately, for the foreseeable future is going to be a strictly AWS technology. And that's really just because of the kind of the conventions that we leverage to make IAM safety work. Using Google for an example, they don't have the concept of explicit denies in their IAM policies. And so because of that, if we were trying to roll out IAM safety for Google, we would need to actually make changes to your direct permissions instead of having kind of a sidecar type permission thing that does the denying. So, so long story short, it's mostly for AWS. Azure is coming along shortly, and then Google is further behind just because of the traction we've seen.
Okay, next question. The Cloud Supervisor solution, does it offer any API that we can interact with?
Not today. And again, this is still very new for us. We had a Cloud Supervisor 1, but this Cloud Supervisor 2 was really re-architected to leverage Dome 9 continuous compliance. From here, again, if I'm collecting a lot of these different kind of requests and questions on the Cloud Supervisor side so that I can make sure they all get prioritized. So if there's a particular type of use case that you want to accomplish within that, again, please ping me so that we can start to talk about that and either figure out a way we can do it today, or I can make sure that that's something that I can get planned to get rolled out.
Okay, and our last question, can this be run within the GovCloud ITAR limitations?
Yeah, as far as functionally, yes. I'd say generally looking at our customers, we don't have a ton of federal adoption yet, and so personally, I haven't been working with a lot of GovCloud customers. I know we can integrate in with GovCloud. We've still got the same kind of capabilities, not only on the read, but on the write side. But if the question is more around how does this work with ITAR and all those sorts of things, I'd need to dig into that further and talk to my security team to get you a better answer, because if I haven't done it, I don't want to speculate and sign us up for something that is a big deal.
Okay, and actually it looks like we have one more. Is the IAM Access lease only available via Android or iPhone app, as shown in the demo?
Yes. Yeah. So, with that, the nature of having it by an app is that we really wanted this to be a fixed kind of out of band type solution. And so because of that, it's really, it's just limited to the phones.
Okay, great. Well, that concludes our Q&A portion. Thank you, Alex. All right, everyone, this concludes today's webinar. Thank you for attending. If you have any further questions on the information presented today, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via the email qanda@dome9.com. I have a few final notes. If you've enjoyed the webinar presented today and would like to experience the Dome9 Arc platform for yourself, we are offering a 14-day free trial, as mentioned by Alex. Please visit our website at www.dome9.com and click on the Get Started button of our homepage. Just register and a representative from Dome9 will contact you to activate your free trial. Additionally, if you'd like the webinar today and would like to hear more about the multi-cloud security solutions Dome9 provides, please visit the resources page on our website and sign up for several of our upcoming webinars, or go to www.dome9.com/webinars. If there's a topic you would like us to discuss, please contact us through our website and let us know. With that, we thank you for your time today and hope you found the content informative. This now concludes the Dome9 webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day.